Well, a warm welcome to today's talk. It's Saturday the 6th of November. Now, this is not what I normally do on this video, but I've been overwhelmed with requests to examine this paper here from the British Medical Journal, this report from the British Medical Journal. This is COVID researcher blows the whistle on data integrity issues in Fisa's vaccine trial. Now, this does sound pretty concerning, so it is necessary to have a look at it. And the subtitle here, Revelations of Poor Practice, the contract research company helping to carry out Fisa's pivotal COVID-19 vaccine trial raises questions about data integrity and regulatory oversight. So this does sound pretty serious on first sight, and as we say, merits inspection. Now, the pivotal paper that it's talking about, I believe, is this one here. Now, this is that paper from the New England Journal of Medicine. Of course, peer-reviewed, highly prestigious journal, and we looked at this on this channel in great detail, indeed with quite a lot of rejoicing, it has to be said, back in the end of December 2020. Very early on in this year, I think we looked at this. I think we looked about this about the 2nd of January or something. So that's the trial it's looking at, and of course, this is the trial that basically instigated the vaccination program with Fisa. Now, this is a quick review of the data from that trial. Efficacy of the Pfizer vaccine. So up here we have number of confirmed COVID-19 cases 7 days after the second dose. 8 in the Pfizer group and 162 in the placebo group, and it was trumpeted as an efficacy of 95%, which we rejoiced at here on this channel at the time from this peer-reviewed data. Serious adverse events were comparable in both groups, low in both groups, we were informed at that time. So this was the trial, 2-dose regime of the Pfizer versus the placebo. And the overall efficacy, as we've said, 95%. And importantly, this is the review of the safety profile, again published at the end of 2020. Transient mild to moderate pain at the injection site, fatigue, headache, adverse events similar to those associated with other vaccines. So that there was the review of the paper at that time. Now, the reason I've put this up now is this is direct from the New England Journal of Medicine website, and we see that the paper is still available in the public domain. So I think we can assume that the New England Journal of Medicine is examining this in some detail as we speak, and I strongly suspect all of these authors are working on it as we speak. At least I'd certainly hope they've done quite a lot of work on this in the last few days. But as of yet, this paper has not been retracted. And I think that's quite an important point. The paper has not been retracted by the New England Journal of Medicine. If it does, of course, we'll talk about it very quickly. So what were these concerns? So revelation of poor practice at a contract research company. Pfizer's pivotal vaccine trial raises questions about data integrity, which I don't like the sound of because we want to have good data integrity, and regulatory oversight, which I don't like the sound of because we want to have good regulatory oversight. So as we said, that's the original paper. Check it out for yourself. New England Journal of Medicine, still available. No indication that that has been retracted. And also, by way of background here, Pfizer's chairman and chief executive, as was quoted at the time, as I've said before, we are operating at the speed of science. So quite a nice soundbite there, indicating that, or what is it indicating? Indicating that all the scientific procedures were going briskly, but not being rushed, which is what we believed. So operating at the speed of science. Now, the group that's mentioned in this paper, in fact, I'll just put up the PDF of this. Is the PDF of the paper here. That you might be able to see in a little more detail. Do download it for yourself. I've got my printed out copy here that I've been reading for the last few hours. But this is it because you won't really see this small copy. Here it is here. So all the report is there. Check it out for yourself, all freely available I mean, just for example here, one thing that concerned me, I don't know if you can see this, but this is about the Food and Drug Administration clinical trials. Elizabeth Wonkner, president of Citizens for Responsible Care and Research Incorporated, says that the agency oversight capacity is severely under-resourced. Well, I don't like the sound of that. I mean, ideally, the FDA should be well-resourced because this is taking decisions that are affecting the health of, you and me, to put it quite bluntly. So again, things there that don't sound totally ideal, but going on to review what the paper's saying. So it was this Ventavia research group. That seems to be the link there, as far as I can tell. That's the company. And they seem to be like a research contract company that Fisa got to supervise aspects of their original trial. So researchers at the Fisa were testing Pfizer's vaccine at several sites in Texas, this seems to be relating to, where quite a lot of the work was done. Now, this is a regional director, Brooke Jackson. Now, the only reason I put her name in is because it's in the public domain now on that paper, otherwise I wouldn't, but it has. Has told the BMJ that the company, and presumably here she's talking about Ventavia Research, falsified data. Well, we don't want data to be falsified, we want the real data, because we need genuine, what we call valid data, to be able to make valid deductions from. So falsified data would not be good. Unblinded patients and unblinded staff would not be good, because this is supposed to be a double-blind controlled trial. That means the people carrying out and supervising, the principal investigator, for example, who's actually investigating the efficacy of the vaccine, is supposed to be blind, so that they don't have any, shall we say, subconscious prejudice towards one particular outcome. And of course, the patients are supposed to be blind. No one's supposed to know, because we want to eliminate subconscious effects in the researchers and the placebo effects in those receiving the vaccine. So if patients were unblinded, that would represent suboptimal research practice. Employees employed inadequately trained vaccinators. Well, that wouldn't be good, because we want the vaccinators to be fully trained. We're slow to follow up on adverse events reported in Pfizer's pivotal trial, phase 3 trial. Now, this wouldn't be good, because we want to know what all the adverse events are, and we want them to be reported on promptly, because if there's any adverse events, I think this happened in the Oxford AstraZeneca trial, didn't it, that there was an adverse event related to the spinal cord in one patient that they thought might be related to the vaccine, and the vaccine trial was halted just in case the vaccine was dangerous. Now, it turned out it wasn't, and it was able to carry on, but it was suspended. The trial was suspended. And I don't think anyone's saying that the race to be first to get the vaccine was a factor here. But, it's something that we wouldn't want to influence it, isn't it? We wouldn't want that to be an influence. Staff who conducted quality control checks were overwhelmed by the volume of problems they were finding. Direct quote from the paper. Well, again, here we want staff who are conducting quality control to investigate all the problems they were finding and not being overwhelmed by the amount of problems. US Food and Drug Administration were informed. So the FDA were informed about this, and we're not told when, but presumably at an early stage. But from this information we have, we don't know that the FDA acted on that or not at the time. We're simply not told that. It would be interesting if the FDA wanted to come on the channel and talk about that, but we're not told. Ventavia later fired Ms. Jackson the same day, apparently. For the same day she reported this to the FDA, she was sacked, which isn't good, because we wouldn't want people to be sacked, ideally, on those grounds, but this appears to be what happened. The BMJ has been provided with dozens of internal company documents. So the BMJ has published this because they have got access to evidence, they are saying. They're evidence of company documents, photos, audit recordings and emails. So it looks like the BMJ has got evidence for what it's saying here, although, of course, we're not provided with all the evidence, as some of that would be presumably pretty sensitive. Ms. Jackson repeatedly informed her superiors, apparently, about poor laboratory management. Now, this is not good because we wouldn't want poor laboratory management, we would want good laboratory management. So it's a pity that she thought the laboratory management was poor. Good laboratory management would have been better. Patient safety concerns, well, that's not good because we want patients to be as safe as possible at all times. She reported data integrity issues, which is not good because we don't want poor data integrity, we want high quality data integrity. That drug assessment confirmation printouts were being left in the patient's charts, accessible to blinded personnel. So again, people that were supposed to be blinded could have known which group the patients were in, and even potentially some patients would know which group they're in. Now, we understand this was later corrected, but what we don't know, it doesn't tell us that this data where there was a question mark over the blinding, whether that was retracted from the study or not. We're not told that. The intimation in the article is that it wasn't retracted. Am I fair in saying that? That was my, let me just say that was my impression reading the article. It didn't say it was retracted anyway, as far as I could detect. Company wasn't able to quantify the types and numbers of errors that they were finding when examining the trial paperwork for quality control. Well, this isn't ideal because ideally the company would be able to quantify the types and numbers of errors that we're finding. So it's a pity that they didn't know that. Now, ICON is another contract organisation used by Fisa. That seems to be them there. And they seem to have a pretty good oversight from what I can gather, because ICON then highlighted over 100 outstanding queries older than 3 days old. Now, the queries in the trial as they go on should be answered within 24 hours. But ICON here were identifying to this company that there's 100 outstanding queries that should have been dealt with at least 48 hours before, so that again is suboptimal. Now, apparently people at the company were worried over FDA, Food and Drug Administration inspection. Now, this is unfortunate because if you're working in a company where this is going on, you should ideally welcome outside inspection. So I always welcome peer review. So, for example, yesterday I got Tonga, which is in the near New Zealand somewhere. I got that mixed up with a place in Africa, so apologies for that. But you all peer reviewed me, and we now correct that. We correct that. So we should be open to peer review. So why would they be worried about FDA inspection? Surely that would be welcomed, because the FDA are going to bring in experts who could help and improve the validity of the data that's being gathered. Now, other concerns raised in this BMJ article: participants placed in hallway after injections not being monitored by clinical staff. Well, that's not ideal because we would want participants to be monitored in a clinical area by clinical staff to make sure there was no immediate adverse reaction. So that's disappointing to read. Lack of timely follow-ups of patients who experienced adverse events. Well, that's not good because you would want timely follow-up of patients who experienced adverse events. Very timely indeed, in fact. Protocol deviations not being reported. Well, you would want protocol deviations to be reported. So again, that is suboptimal. Vaccines not being stored at proper temperatures. Well, that's not good because you would want the vaccines to be stored at the proper cold temperatures. Mislabelling laboratory specimens could mean that they got mixed up and the wrong data was given. So ideally, you would want essentially you'd want all laboratory specimens to be correctly labelled. Targeting of Ventavia staff for reporting these types of problems. Well, this is bad because you would want ideally openness and transparency in an organisation so that mistakes could be rapidly rectified. So there seems to be a few things here that are really quite suboptimal. Really quite concerning, actually. FDA Advisory Committee meeting held on the 10th of December. Now, we understand that Pfizer didn't bring the problems at Ventavia up at this meeting. They must have run out of time or something at this meeting. But the problems we understand from the journal, from the British Medical Journal, weren't discussed. And the next day, the FDA issued emergency use authorization of the vaccine, which I remember being delighted at the time from the information that we were given. Now, following on from this, the FDA, so in August this year, the FDA gave full approval to Pfizer's vaccine, of course. Again, we talked about that at the time. And then the FDA published, they then revealed that 9 of the trial sites, 153 sites, were inspected. So I guess that means 144, is it 144 weren't inspected? So of the 153 trial sites, 144 were not inspected by the Food and Drug Administration prior to giving emergency use authorization. So 9 sites were inspected and 144 weren't. Ideally, all 153 sites would have been inspected, of course, by the FDA to give full accountability. FDA full trial swabs were not taken from. The FDA is saying full trial swabs not taken from 477 people with suspected cases of symptomatic COVID-19. So it looks like there was 477 people who had symptomatic cases of COVID-19 who weren't swabbed. Now, were these people in the placebo group, or were these people in the control group? We're not told. So if they were in the if they had COVID symptoms and they weren't diagnosed and they were in the experimental group, that means that they're actually given the vaccine. That would probably mean that the efficacy of the vaccine was actually better. But if there was 477 people who developed COVID symptoms who turned out to be positive but weren't tested, who were in the placebo group, that would tend to lower the efficacy or the apparent efficacy of the vaccine. So 477 people with suspected COVID symptomatic, full trial swabs were not taken from 477 people. Not taken. That's what this article says. Other employees' accounts. In the article, this is other people in this company's employ. Everything that you complained about was spot on, they said about Ms. Jackson later. One person said. 2 former Ventavia employees spoke to the BMJ anonymously. Well, it's a pity they had to speak anonymously, that they felt the need to do that is unfortunate. For fear of reprisal and of loss of job prospects in the tightly knit research community. Well, I was disappointed to read that the research community, according to the BMJ, is tightly knit. I would much prefer an open and transparent community that promotes open and transparent discussion of the data. One in previous, or I think it was a previous employer, said, I don't think the data was good, clean data. I suppose data's not clean or dirty, but I guess if it's not good and clean, I guess that means there's questions about the data, which would be bad. And it's a crazy mess, is what one person said. Now, that's bad because you would want things to be well ordered, as opposed to being a crazy mess. Now, Pfizer's hired this company, Ventavia, as a research subcontractor on 4 other vaccine clinical trials. A COVID-19 vaccine in children and young adults, pregnant women, a booster dose and an RSV trial. And I'm going to include all these. These are all hyperlinks on your thing, on the in the description. So these were the trials that have been affected. Now, we would hope that these are now being rigorously scrutinised, these trials, where this company was involved in the research process. So that was the one about RNA vaccine candidate against COVID-19 in healthy children and young adults. This was the one in pregnant women. The study to evaluate the safety and efficacy of a booster dose of Pfizer in those over 16 years of age. So again, hopefully they are reviewing the data here to make sure all the data that decisions are being taken from is very high, clean data of good integrity. And finally, there was this trial here, study to evaluate the efficacy, immunogenicity of a respiratory syncytial virus trial as well. So there we go. Now, as we said, let's just go back live to the site here. This is still the New England Journal of Medicine site, live as I record now on Saturday evening at whatever time it is, just after 7 p.m. in England time. This paper's not been retracted. So can we assume that because this paper has not been retracted, that the New England Journal of Medicine is happy that the overall results and data were not compromised by these issues. Well, I think the thing to do is read this for yourself and see what you think. But as of now, that paper has not been retracted, so I think we have to assume that the British Medical Journal are happy with it, and that this hasn't fundamentally affected. These issues have not fundamentally affected the overall integrity of the data in a significant way. But it would be good to hear a statement on that from the New England Journal of Medicine as soon as possible. This feeds into the whole issue of trust, doesn't it? You know, I've been giving out vaccines since I was, when did I get my first vaccine? I was probably about 20 when I gave my first vaccine. And of course, I've been receiving them much longer than that. And, you know, vaccines have saved untold amounts of pain, suffering and death in the world. But we have to have this, the scientific process has to be transparent, and it has to be valid for people to trust in it. And given that some people don't trust in vaccines anyway, really this sort of thing doesn't help. So as what we should have is perfect integrity all the way through, so that we can completely trust the clinical data that we are given. But unfortunately, this puts, shall we say, this puts questions in people's minds. Okay, thank you for watching.